Okay, it's been a while. Excuse my appearance here. I haven't bothered to brush my hair and get pretty for you guys. Where we are now is I've hooked up the computer to the turbo engine. This is a turbo engine, turbo stock ECU setup for a Datsun 28Z L28et. I've got the fuel pump hooked up. Well, I got the computer hooked up, and why it's been so long is I've been spending a lot of time going through, trying to check to make sure I've got power where I'm supposed to have power, grounds where I'm supposed to have grounds, connections where I'm supposed to have connections, basically simulating the rest of the car wiring harness. While I have a harness to, plug in, the problem with that is it's not installed in a car, so you have to provide it with the correct battery power, and you have to make sure that you have the fuel pump. And I have kind of a hybrid fuel pump situation. I don't use their fuel pump module, which is kind of ridiculous in my opinion. So I had to kind of make a little work around that, add an extra relay in there, and do some other stuff. But bottom line is, I tested. The way I tested it was, first I used a test light with the computer unplugged, and I just turned it on to make sure there was no dead short somewhere in my system. This was, again, with the computer not plugged in. The only thing that came on when I turned it to on, the test light, which is a very low amperage test light, like 100 milliamps max, was the fuel pump relay. It actually clicked on, so it had enough. There, there was a voltage drop across that test lamp. It was enough to energize the coil on the EFI relay. Sorry, the EFI relay, if I didn't say that. You could actually hear the relay click on and click off. So that was good. And I also checked to make sure when the relay clicked on that I was getting power to the correct pins on the ECU. I think it was pin 27 and 35 on the ECU gets power. I believe the crank angle sensor gets a power feed. I think that's pretty much, for as far as the ECU parts concerned goes, that was working properly. So after that, I said, okay, let's put an amp meter on it and see what kind of amps it pulls. Since a power light was, since everything seemed to be working right, I went ahead and plugged in the ECU, and then I'm ready to start it. So here we go. The thing we're going to do now is we're going to have the ECU is plugged in. I'm monitoring the current. I'm going to turn the switch to on, and let's see what happens. Now, I'm not going to start it. I'm just going to turn it on. I'm going to turn to the start position. That's because A, I don't have the start wire hooked up to the starter. I'm not quite there yet, so that'll be the next step. But we just do one thing at a time around here. When I'm going through unknowns like this, I like to check one step at a time, make sure I don't have any catastrophic failures that can be caught, before they happen. So, what we're going to do now, I'll show you the setup. I went ahead and plugged in the fuel pump into the tank, so it's going to pressurize the system. Here's the current setup. That's the fuse block, or where all the fusible links are. There's your EFI relay. There's your fuel pump relay, fuel pump. I believe I have all the grounds done properly. I have a ground goes to the airflow meter. There's a thin ground wire here, that little guy there. I wasn't sure about that, so I went ahead and attached it to the this vacuum actuator. I don't know, it seemed like a good place to go. I've got grounds up here. This is my this loose ground wire here. That goes to my coil, my ignition coil, for grounding, for firing the ignition coil. So this was an added ground I put in. These are stock grounds that were already built to the EFI system. That's my meter down there telling me something. I don't know what. I've got all. One thing I did notice. One of my checks is when I was doing the low voltage test before I hooked up all the computer, was I should have been getting voltages to each one of those to that pin connector down here, to each one of these green wires. which goes to the EFI, to the fuel injectors. One that wasn't working, I found I had a bad connection on one of those, so I had to wiggle that. So a lot of these plug-ins, the injectors are probably questionable. I'll have to keep an eye on that. They may need to be all replaced. Lots of just stuff going on down here, but you can see it's all plugged in. I believe I have everything I need for it to run. We're going to try to initialize the system for the first time here and see what happens. Crank it down this way. Crank it down this way. Right. And let's see, I'm going to watch the current over here. Pump came on. And I get any current flow. Oh, off. So the pump turned on and turned itself off. I guess that's a good thing. I assume this system has and the fuel pump pressure is 36 psi. So I assume this has some kind of a priming situation that's different from the Z I have. My earlier EFI doesn't prime the pump like that. It only primes when you turn it start or when the engine's actually running. So that's a good thing. So we're going to turn this on. And what's my current draw? Currently, I'm pulling, it looks like 1 amp. So the 1 amp must be its idle current, I guess. Again, the EFI was just like 100 milliamps at most when it wasn't plugged into the computer. Turn this off. And let's see what the current is reading now. Okay, now we're at 0. That makes perfect sense. So that seemed to be working okay. So I guess the next step's going to have to be to go ahead and finish it off. So what I have to do now is hook up a start connection to the start switch, which was no big deal. I wonder what would happen if I just turned the start all the way to start. And the engine doesn't crank over. All right, let's do that just for fun and see if anything weird happens. I'm going to keep an eye on the current. I assume the pump will start up and run again. So I'm going to be watching the meter. I'll tell you what I'm seeing. Ready, set. I can't see. Remember that the engine will not start right now. I can't quite see. Okay, there. I can see the meter from here. Okay, I'm pulling about 9 amps. Let's see what happens. Not much. I don't hear anything. Nothing unusual happened when I turned it to start. So I don't know what the 1 amp is. Maybe it's some kind of a idle current for the computer. Maybe some sensors being activated. I don't know. But it is what it is. So the next thing is going to hook up the start, and we'll come back for the part 2. Anyway, one step at a time. I know you're probably saying, "Oh, gee, I really wanted to see it start." Yeah, I get it. I want to see it start too. Believe me. I think I've been delaying this because of the fear of failure has been deferred by not knowing if it's going to work or not. But at some point, you got to pull the trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the start wire, and we'll come back. Thanks for watching.